Crystal Asige is a lawmaker.
Yes.
Okay? And to make laws, you must strike deals with your fellow legislators because you're actually telling them, okay, this is what I'm proposing and I'd like you to support it. Recently, she celebrated something big and is a big win because a piece of legislation that she proposed went through Parliament and it was assented to by the President last week. We're talking about that. Plus, there are many others that she's working on. Crystal, good morning.
Morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
I like that segue. That's why they give you the big bucks. Yeah.
You can see that.
Good.
Unazandika mstari hapa hivi 1 or 2. Segue za noma kalatif.
I need to, by the way, I need to pen something on your behalf.
Be careful what you say. He'll be like, now we need a studio session. I need a line in your song.
It's a collab.
Yeah, it's a collab. It started with Fixing the Nation.
Mnitaje tu.
Just want a name drop.
Nani choro kwa matatu.
Something like that.
Okay. I'm just here at your service. Yes, as a public servant, whatever you need.
Oh, very good.
Representation at its finest.
Yeah.
Jano represents us in going to research for what has been said previously by people and bringing it to us as a quotable quote. And she has a quote for today.
Right. Today's quote is actually from Pierre Lumumba. We hosted him just, an hour or two ago. But he didn't say this during our show. He said it previously. No matter how good you are, if you stay for too long, you spoil it. No matter how good you are, if you stay for too long, you spoil it. You spoil where you are that you've stayed for too long.
Right.
Yeah. How do you perceive that?
I love that. It's similar to leaving the party when the party is still going well, right? Yeah. I think it's true. I feel as though many people overstay their position. They don't just keep their seat warm, they actually break the seat, and it needs to be fixed on shows like this, but absolutely believe it. I personally, as somebody who is a first-time legislator, somebody who has no history of politics in my family, I'm not from dynasty, I'm not from wealth, I am just an ordinary Kenyan who was able to get an opportunity to represent and oversight for a particular interest group, and I feel like when my time is up, I'll be okay. I'll go back to my regular life in Mombasa, being a creative, writing mistaris for people like Eric. I am absolutely fine with it. I know and I'm certain that with the crop of young people who are coming up today, there'll be someone to hand over the baton to, and I'll be very, very pleased to do that as soon as I can.
Right. I love that your immediate worry or the next thought that came in is that there'll be someone worthy to pass the baton to, as opposed to the worry of how would I go back to now regular living, How do I go back to a life without privilege, without a chase car and a bodyguard and a salary and, access to the who's of this country? That's what most people would worry about. Why is that not like a factor for you? Yours is like, who am I handing over to? Who's next? Who's continuing the work?
Because I'm not like most people. I think that I've had a life where I have, for example, had eyesight and I've had to lose it and accept that I've lost it. So that life experience has taught me that A, nothing is permanent. B, you need to be agile. You need to be able to adapt really quickly. And you need to be able to, if you can change your circumstance, change it. But if you can't, then you have to change how you think about it, how you look at it, and how you react to it. So I think I'm somebody that through life, and through whatever people think the disability is, it's a curse, it's a bad thing, it's an unfortunate event. I actually see it as a blessing because I've been able to learn very, very, very many lessons that I even inject into my politics, into my work as a leader. One of them being that things change and you have to be prepared to accept change when it does come. So that's why I feel what I'm doing is so that I can just hold the door open with my ankle, my back foot for somebody else to walk through when I'm done. Yeah.
When we started earlier, I remember saying when we were talking about having you managed to build bipartisan support for the Persons with Disabilities Bill. You also have managed to remain an ally and advocate for Jenzi, who led the protest. It's what's the word I'm looking for? I'm wondering how you've managed to do it in a dispensation that has often seemed quite one-sided. Right. You've actually managed to unite people along these lines of the Persons with Disability Bill. But how do you reconcile those two truths of saying what the Gen Z stood for was meaningful, was accurate, and I stand with them, but also I have a government to serve? How do you reconcile those two truths?
I think it's important to understand people's characters, what makes people tick. to understand egos, especially in politics, and to know when to leverage, which part of that knowledge that you've been able to pick up. So for me personally, I read people. I think actually psychology is a huge benefit for anyone who wants to get into politics. You need to be able to understand the person sitting across from you. What is it that they want? What is it that will make them see your side of the argument? What can you tap into that is of interest to them, that will pique their interest so that they can support you? So those are the things. Though I didn't actually study psych, but I'm somebody who's very interested in the subject matter. So I read on it a lot.
Maybe you didn't study it in school, but you clearly have studied it.
Yes. Because reading people is really like 80% of the job in anything dealing with human beings. So thankfully, PWDs and disability in general is not a contentious or politicized issue. It can be in some ways, in minuscule ways, but in general, everyone understands that in every county, in every ward, in every sub-county, there is a person with disability, there is a household of people with disabilities, and so as legislators, they see the bigger picture, like macro level. And so I've been able to tap into that part of their psyche and to convince, hey, this is not about majority, minority. This is not about finance bill. This is not about anything contentious. It's about human beings and their right to life and freedoms and things like that. So also, I think it's important to say that many people know when to say nothing, like myself. Many people do not know. Many people know how to say nothing, I'll say, and I know when to say nothing. There are conversations that I'm like, if I speak up and I say what I really think in this moment, it will jeopardize the things I've been working on for the last 2.5 years. So is it important in this moment to stand up and yell about X? Or do I look at the bigger picture and the, what I'm actually trying to achieve for PWDs in the shortest time possible and say, okay, let me pull back on this one, but the next one, I'll stand up and speak. So that's also important, when to say nothing.
Yeah, that's wisdom. Right. I wanted to ask about I wanted to ask about the 2003 version of this bill, but Mariam,
just
go ahead.
Before that, you made an exception though, when it came to the Jenzi protests and what we were going through at that time. Is it because, not that it trumped the work that you were doing for the Persons with Disabilities Act, but that it was just that monumentally important that, it was not something you could be quiet about?
Yes, it was something that was shifting the entire nation. In that moment, you could see, even in the weeks coming up to it, you could see what was happening. And me being outside at the gate when, tear gas was being thrown, I was in all that commotion as well. Running and trying to figure out where's my bodyguard, because I didn't have him at the moment. I was walking out of chambers, and so he was elsewhere. So I was also in the midst of all that, and just the adrenaline that I felt continued and passed over to the next morning when we were sat in chambers, and that was the Wednesday morning when I made that speech, and I was still very heavy on that adrenaline. And it was past an agenda, it was past politics, it was about my people, young people. I'm a young person. I could hear people screaming on the street just outside the gate. And I know that there are members of parliament with disabilities who are also struggling. And so I think my humanity and my compassion for people, for young people, overrided that reservation that I may have otherwise employed, when looking at an issue and thinking, okay, when do I say, when do I not say, what's important to say, what's not important to say. At that moment, it was far more that needed to be fought for, and that's exactly what I did.
All right. That is incredible. I wanted to go back, Crystal, to 2003, because we do want to come to this incredible milestone that you managed to share with the world. But the 2003 Persons with Disabilities Act 2003 was Kenya's foundational legal framework for promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities. I just want you to be able to bring home how you were able to update it. Was it something that you saw missing? Was it something that you felt needed to be updated? What is the difference between that one and the one that that was assented to?
Huge differences. I think that number one, the 2003 Act was pre-constitution. So what we saw before my act of last week was assented to was something that's not aligned with our constitution. So there were things that did not adhere to constitution provisions, so on and so forth. So that was the first issue, the biggest one. The second one, it was not also aligned to the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which was assented to, which was signed by different member states in the world in 2008. So also not aligned to, world and global standards for disability rights. That's second thing. And then number 3, more than 20 years old.
Yeah.
More than 20 years old. There are children who were born and have never seen sort of like with their rights, if they're people with disabilities, fought for or adhered to. So there was many issues with that. And remember that the only reason that the 2003 PWD Act was assented to was because our former president, Kibaki, happened to acquire a disability at the time. Right. And so he fast-tracked that bill and said, okay, Parliament, I'm now in a wheelchair and I realize this is an important issue. So let's fast-track this agenda item. And within a year, it passed through all stages of Parliament. And so it's important for me to be able to, as a person with disability as well, it seems that when you're in the shoe is when you really realize, what is important and what's not important. For me to have been able to pick up the bill and say, apart from just making a few amendments, let me just repeal the entire act and then also add provisions that are aligned to our constitution, to the CRPD, and also to technological advances in disability, of 2000 and of the 21st century, sorry. That was very important because people with disabilities require, global level or global standards of disability rights and provisions, I think.
So, Senator, to any person with a disability or a caregiver or a family member, what new thing are they likely to now experience with this new law?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, there's lots of different provisions that I've been able to add, and people can, I've seen lots of young people, I love it, on Twitter and stuff using Grok to break down the bill. Yes. And I've actually been able to post this morning, if anyone's following me on my social medias, a few of the highlights of the bill. Some of them being things like incentives for people who employ people with disabilities. You get a percentage of tax incentives as an employer. If you are able to accommodate or refurbish or retrofit your building or your workplace for people with disabilities, you also get tax exemption. I've added the age of retirement to 65 from 60, because you'll find that people with disabilities, we get late into school because of all the barriers, which means that we are late into employment because of the same barriers, and therefore, if we stop at 60, we haven't really had that many years of actual, meaningful employment. So that was something that came out really strongly in stakeholder engagement. So now it's 65 for PWDs. We have tax incentives and reliefs for carers and parents of persons with disabilities, which is a huge thing. I think parents, mums, dads who have kids with disabilities have really been suffering for years, mine included. And because I saw how much effort and money and finance and resource goes into raising a child with a disability like myself, that was something that was very important. It came out, again, strongly in public participation. We also have issues about voting, making sure that buildings are accessible, voting materials accessible. There's increased privacy as well. If you can imagine me as a VIP, a visually impaired person, going to vote, and you have those people, those people who just hang around. Let me help you in just Linux idea. And I'm like, no. There needs to be actual material that I can use independently. Otherwise, it's not a fair process for me. So those are some of the highlights, but there's so many more. It's like
I saw one.
Yeah.
Parents or guardians of registered persons with disabilities will receive exemptions from taxable income. Explain that.
Correct. So this is what I'm talking about. If you talk to a parent or a caregiver who has a child with a disability, let's say a parent with an autistic child, you will hear them talking about speech therapy fees, you'll hear them talking about medication fees, you'll hear them talking about having to get them into a special autistic school because our current education system or schooling, traditional schools are not accommodating to neurodiverse students. You'll hear them having to pay more money to go for medical assessment and checkups. And so there was a parent who told me one time, and I remember this very clearly, that she spends about 6,000 shillings per week on her autistic child, just to take her through all of these processes that I've just talked about. That is times 4 weeks, times 52 weeks in a year. And that's a lot of money. And therefore, you have found, or you will find that many parents have to leave their employment to take care of, especially those who need 24-hour support if you have a disability. And in short, they sacrifice their whole life. They give it all up for their child. And therefore, I, in consultation with many PWDs, came up with this particular provision to say that if I, as a person with a severe disability, if I can't get employment, but I would have had the right to a tax exemption myself, if I can't do it because I can't get employment, then why not hand that over to my parent who's taking care of me so that she can or he can gain from that benefit. So that's where it comes from. So
what's this? Is this a relief, or is it a complete exemption from income tax?
Well, the regulations need to be set, which is which has to happen by through cabinet. So the regulations will tell us further, because it does say as well in the Act that that said parent or caregiver needs to be able to apply to the relevant cabinet secretary, and then the cabinet secretary reviews the application and the criteria through the regulations that will be created, and then from there decide how much from their tax. Is it up to 50,000 shillings? Is it up to 100,000, 150, etc.? So it all depends on the assessment made by the said cabinet secretary. So regulations need to be put in place. That's another reason why the next step is really important, implementation, because it's fine to have a nice title and we're all really celebrating, but how is it going to be rolled out?
Right. That was going to be the thread I was going to pull at, because we've had these conversations before where even the existing tax reliefs and exemptions were very hard to get because of the structural issues. It's just very, very difficult. So now as we get into the implementation, are there ways in which we can make sure that it's as easy as possible to be compliant with this Persons with Disabilities Act for everyone across, whether it's from KRA, whether it's employers, whether it's on an individual capacity, everywhere?
I think for implementation, for me, the lowest hanging fruit is to start by undertaking a special census of PWDs.
Okay.
Because currently, the numbers, I believe, and many people in the community believe they're wrong. In the 2009 census, we were counted at 1.3 million, approximately. And then 10 years later, in 2019, we were counted at 900,000. That means 400,000 of us disappeared, got healed, or died.
Also that there were almost zero births of persons with disabilities in those 10 years.
Right, and it doesn't make sense that the general population goes up, but the population of PWDs goes down. That is not mathematically sound at all. So I've been pleading with Cabinet Secretary Alfred Mutua, who heads Labour and Social Welfare, as well as other cabinet secretaries that I do meet in my oversight work, to push for this special census to happen at cabinet level, because it needs money, of course. It needs money so that enumerators can be trained and trained properly on how to identify a PWD, as well, because they don't understand that somebody with dyslexia is a PWD. Somebody who is neurodiverse is a PWD. So before in the previous censuses, is that a word? It doesn't sound like sensai. It sounds like
we do it censuses.
Censuses. In the previous ones, enumerators were also admitted that they did not know what a disability, right? Because there's so many different, there are over 900 disabilities. And so if you're only used to seeing a wheelchair and a white cane and somebody sign languaging for you to know that they're PWD, then of course you're missing out on many other people. Plus, the other two censuses did not count children under 5 years old. So that disqualified any kids who were born with a disability. They were not counted at all. And so you see why the numbers, of course, are wrong. So once we get the data, then we will count. We will count in budgetary allocation. We will count in programming, in activities for PWDs. We will count in conversations, in parliament, so on and so forth. We will actually be a force to reckon with, because I believe, which is the same sentiment as the WHO, which is that every country has about 15% of PWDs within the country, which makes Kenya roughly 8-point-something million if we use that statistic, that prevalence rate.
And we're only saying 900 million?
900,000, correct. And so that's a huge voter block, by the way.
Yes.
We also come with our votes. So I think that if we are able to raise money at cabinet level for a special census, number one, and then piggyback that exercise with have an enumerator to count, and then have somebody represented from Ministry of Health to identify different disabilities and actually like desegregate them properly, not just the usual ones that we traditionally know and see, and then at the same time have a representative from immigration to give said people IDs at the same activity, and then somebody from National Council for PWDs to also register those who can get a disability certificate. So in one exercise, we can kill...
do all those things.
Correct.
When is that to happen? Because I think you raise a very important issue here. We have the National Council for Persons with Disability, and we've got the Ministry and the State Department for Social Protection and all. But number one, the system is not well equipped to identify disability. And then number two, the society is not well equipped to identify and acknowledge disability. There are very many parents who will not register their child as a person with a disability because of the stigma or because they just don't know. They think my child cannot read. They just don't see dyslexia as a disability. So how do we address all those?
So that's a really good point, acknowledging. And by the way, it's also like self-acknowledgement, because there's many PWDs who have not accepted it within themselves that they're a PWD either. So they won't come out to say, I am a proud and person with disability in this country. So there's an issue there internally and also, like you say, externally with society. But I think that it needs more training, it needs more sensitization. CHPs have to be brought to the table because they're the ones who deal with people, at ground level. And if they're not trained properly to identify, to be able to understand disability, then they cannot sensitize that household on how to take care of said person with disability, get them assessed, get them registered, etc., etc. So it's a big effort, and I don't think it's up to just the Minister for Labour. It is a concerted effort between education, health, and labour, as well as, at the end of the day, Treasury, because they have the monies to pump into these activities to make us seen and make us heard in the country.
And with that as well, Senator, what do you think the public and private sector need to do differently now that this bill is law? Because I also feel like there's an element of education and advocacy that's required so that everybody is behind it. How would you want them to act differently now that this bill is law?
Yeah, I think getting it popularized is number one for us on this side of the divide. So Cabinet has their own work to do, Council governors have their own work to do in terms of implementation, but we have the work to do in terms of popularizing it. So things like this, talking about it on media, sponsoring, for example, large printing of the bill so that it's in every library in the country, in schools, in public institutions. You can find a copy of the bill. The act.
Of the act.
Sorry, I've been saying bill for like 3 years. So
right. Now it's an act.
Of an act, yes. Act is, you cannot have the word action without act. So I also think that, not think that, but I've been reaching out to people like LSK to say, hey, LSK, can we have a sit down and see how all of your members can sit and maybe offer, some sort of like legal aid in different communities, because I can't do it on my own. I cannot scream about this in 47 counties on my own. But disseminating it through legal minds, like through LSK, through going to schools, especially OPDs, organizations of persons with disabilities, is really important as well. And making sure that it's not just in the cities and the towns, but we're going to grassroots, because those are the ones, Marsabit, people in Kwale, people in Garissa also need to understand this bill and what it entails for them. And I think that's going to take absolutely everyone. Media, it will take chiefs, local chiefs, it will take, like I said, COG, cabinet, schools, corporates, advertising, people who have CSR monies. Right. Because billboards alike need to go up for this to be really to go around the country.
Right.
It's mainstreaming disability as a conversation. And also looking at the various, you said how many disabilities are recognized?
There's over 900.
Over 900 disabilities. So just people at least knowing half.
Yeah.
Would be a good start.
Yeah.
Would be a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start. But those are many,
Yeah.
right?
Those are many, yeah.
So if you just think about the various disabilities that there are, and people are living with those disabilities. Oh, sorry, I know, Senator, you don't like the word living.
I don't like living.
People have those disabilities,
Yes.
right? And they just don't know about it.
Yeah.
There's a need then to create a lot more awareness about what a disability is, and then what do I do about it? So, which is where my question comes in. What's the role of the National Council for Persons with Disability?
They have the biggest role. They're the biggest stakeholder, I think, in terms of protecting the rights and freedoms of persons with disabilities in the country. That's their mandate. That's why they exist, right? Unfortunately, they are really poorly budgeted for in every year's financial, debates and BPSs and things. So, if they don't have enough money, then of course they can't go around the country talking about this new act and sensitizing people. For example, every single county has only one officer from the National Council. So a county as vast as you name it only has one person in it dealing with PWD issues. I think it's really, it shows how much we've been left behind in the past, how much we've been an afterthought, how much we've been looked at as an other.
Yeah.
Correct. And that should change, because there are too many people with disabilities, too many people who know people with disabilities for this to be othered in government plans and strategies. So National Council has the mandate, yes, but we need more money for the National Council, and we need the public to also roll up their sleeves and also support, because it will not work if you just leave it to one institution or one agency or one legislator.
Right. I know I may be wrong on the numbers, but we do require that at least 5% of our public service be persons with disabilities, right?
Correct.
What are the numbers now? Because I'm trying to look at it, if there is that goodwill from the state before we even start pouring into sectors outside the public service. What are the numbers right now within the public service?
Public service estimates at around 1.8%.
Okay.
I think that's public service, and then corporate, I think Safaricom is at 2-point-something% employment.
Right.
So we're not doing very well. I don't know really how to push more, how to say it more, apart from me actually being in there and fighting and screaming about it. But
can I throw an interesting span into the works? I said that because I've talked to people about their inclusion numbers in their organizations, and sometimes they're like, I know I've hit the quota, it's just that people don't identify as this. So on paper it says no, but I know for sure, yes, that I've hit this quota. Could that be a possibility, that persons with disabilities are not identifying or are not aware? For example, if we think about like dyslexia, like you said, a lot of people get diagnosed much later in life, if at all, things like that.
I mean, it's possible, but then it also speaks to the data being wrong. Because if we cannot unequivocally say that in my company I have employed 20 people with disabilities out of 800, for example, then it will not trickle down into any kind of statistics or percentages that we can see for sure, okay, we are actually improving, or we're not improving, or we're static, or we've plateaued, things like that. So I think that it's incumbent on all of us, the persons with disabilities, to come out and say, yes, I'm a PWD, and this is where I work, etc. And also for employers to encourage their people with disabilities to say, like, hey, I understand that this is a personal struggle or a personal fight, etc., but we need to be able to have you registered formally with National Council, and therefore you will be actually counted in the numbers as employed as a PWD in this company. Right. So I think it's an effort from all sides. Yeah, but that's the possibility that people don't actually want to identify or are afraid of more stigmatization or discrimination if they come out and say.
Or are unaware as well. Or I think that also speaks to now, yes, a destigmatization, which I was wondering, where does that fall as we, have this bill become an act? Where does the destigmatization fall? Because that's still a big issue, unfortunately, we face as a country. We want We want to be seen as people who are liberal and pro this and pro that. But yeah, stigmatization is still a really big issue for persons with disabilities.
Yeah, because we still have traditions and cultures that really look down upon. And in fact, to the point where, you know, death is involved. If you have a child with disability, you're thrown out of the village, out of the boma if you get pregnant with a child with disability, things like that. So in the rural areas, yes, it's a really big issue. In towns where people have a bit more awareness or knowledge on the same, I think destigmatization starts perhaps as well in media, because I can never be what I do not see. Oh, that was deep, right? I just
Even Senator was like, was that me?
All pun intended.
All pun intended.
Dominic from Embu is on the line. Let's hear from him. Dominic, good morning and thank you for calling us. You have a question or comment for the Senator?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Senator, good morning.
Morning.
Yes. Now, my question was simple. I have my mom who is having multiple myeloma. So, her backbone collapsed. So, she's currently on a wheelchair. And my question was, it should be considered as a disability.
Sorry, what happened again? Dominic, we didn't get
I'm
that.
saying
Yep.
she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma 3 years ago.
She was diagnosed with what?
Multiple myeloma.
Multiple myeloma.
Okay.
Yes. It's a cancer of bone marrow.
Okay.
Yes. So her backbone collapsed. So she currently on a wheelchair. Temporarily got up, but again relapsed and went back to a wheelchair. So my question was, can she be considered as a PWD?
That's a good question.
Cancer of the bone marrow.
Yeah.
And it's manifesting, I didn't quite hear how it's manifesting in terms of independent living or hindering her independent living. But the Ministry of Health and all hospitals have a categorization form or assessment that they do, whereby you're able to go and get assessed, and then according to that categorization, how can I say, formula that they have, then they determine what kind of disability you have, if it's permanent, if it is, what type of disability, physical, etc., etc., etc. So there is a categorization format that they do have. I would encourage you to have your loved one with disability go and get assessed, for sure.
What's that process actually? So if you suspect that your child may have a disability, how do you get to know for sure whether they do or not? And thereafter, how do you even register them?
So you go to, first of all, any government hospital, and you request for a disability assessment, and you're able to do that in your county or even at ward level in a government hospital. I would suggest you go to a hospital, not just a clinic or a dispensary, because they are better equipped to have a look at that assessment.
So a level 4.
Correct. Yes, and above. Yeah, and then after that, there is a process where they vet as well. So those papers come from your ward or your sub-county, comes to Nairobi, and then gets assessed in Nairobi. As well, you can even go to KISE. KISE is here in Nairobi, in case our listener is
What's
in Nairobi.
KISE?
It's the Kenya Institute for Special Education.
Okay.
They have assessment that they do for 100 shillings, so it's quite affordable there. And then after the vetting process, because there are many people who lie, right? Many people as well who just have semi-permanent disabilities, like you sprain an ankle, you break a leg, but it's not permanent. So that's also a reason why they vet. And then after that, you're able to, if you are cleared as having a disability of some kind, you're able to now go to a national council and actually get a disability certificate. It's no longer a disability card, it's now a certificate that they have that they print online. And then after that, use that certificate to get benefits, whether that's tools of trade, whether that's assistive software or devices, whether that is support by through stipends to your phone if you have a severe disability, so on and so forth.
Mobility aids as well?
Correct.
Okay.
It sounds, yeah, we have a caller, but
caller on the line. All right, Nancy, good morning. Good morning, Nancy.
Morning.
All right, what's your question for Senator Crystal?
I'd like to ask the senator. I have a relative who has lost 2 limbs due to diabetes. Where does she fall in terms of living with disability? But she was born like a normal child with both limbs.
Okay, it's a great question. I know she'll respond while you're still on the line.
Yes, thanks for that question. Definitely somebody who has lost limbs would be categorized as a PWD. And I think that, like I said in the last question from the last caller, you should get to your nearest assessment center, hospital, or Kise if you're in Nairobi, and then take the process from there. But certainly they should be assessed and given a disability certificate because of losing their limbs and now being an amputee.
How long is that process? Sounds long, tedious, stressful.
What, the disability assessment?
The entire assessment process by the time you get that certificate.
Yeah, when it was me back in the day, because I also wasn't born with a disability.
Tell us your own experience going through this.
When I did it, it was several years ago now, but it was from Mombasa, because that's my county, is where I stay and live. And it took just over a year from Coast General Hospital, and then I went to another hospital for vetting in Chuda, and then had to come to Nairobi to Afya Center, or is that Afya House?
Afya House.
Yes, Afya House. And then after that, we had to go the long waiting process, etc., etc. It took over a year, but I know that that has changed since, because that was a very long time ago. And in fact, I'm working with different AI developers. There's 2 ladies I'm working with who are from USIU, who want to use AI and tech to be able to fasten that process. So that you just go on an app as a PWD and you register for your appointment. You can even get looked at through the phone, through the camera, things like that. Because there's so many amazing things you can do with AI now, right? I mean, you see doctors diagnosing, etc., across the world for different diseases and treatments. So trying to leverage AI to make the process much easier and more equitable for PWDs, because you can't expect somebody to move from Kilifi with their 5-year-old child with disability and go through all these processes. It doesn't make sense.
It's costly, it's stressful. Why does one need to come to Nairobi?
Exactly. So that has since changed, and in fact, we're trying to make it even more easy for PWDs to be found, to get assessed, and to get their certificate so that they can start benefiting from different government programs.
Okay. Are our health care workers well equipped to know all these hundreds of disabilities? So you're going to a level 4 facility, yes, you meet a clinical officer or a doctor. Will they have the proper capacity to actually determine all disabilities, especially neurodivergence disability?
No, because before my act, actually neurodiverse disabilities were not recognized by the state. Okay. It was only physical, hearing, sight, and the ones that, like I say, you traditionally see and you know. So people never understood Down syndrome. They never understood CP. They never understood autism, etc. and the like. So this is the first time that the neurodiverse community are actually being seen and acknowledged through my act, and therefore there needs to be a lot of sensitization by our medical our Ministry of Health to CHPs, to practitioners, etc. From every single level now we're talking about, because though you cannot, of course, understand and be educated on all hundreds of disabilities, there is absolutely room to improve and to understand more disabilities, because they're very intricate and they're very nuanced. And without medical practitioners being able to understand them, then how will a household understand them? Because you need direction, you need guidance, you need advice from the people that you seek medical advice from. So I think it's a really heavy burden on the Ministry of Health. I think that if they don't prioritize it, then we continue to be left behind. And like I say, I think they need to work together, these different ministries, because without working together, then you're sort of like working in silos, and our movement will continue sort of like being the rabbit versus the hare in the race.
We have another caller, Steve from Nairobi. Steve, good morning. Do you have any comment or question for Senator Crystal?
Okay, I have a concern, and in that concern, I may also generate a question. Okay, I have a mother who is now dependent on me. So hearing from what the senator said, my mother is deaf, and she depends on me. So I was asking, can I be also a beneficiary from that act to be exempted from the taxes, as she said, because she depends on me, and I'm the one who provides everything for her.
Okay.
It's a great question. I know the senator has the answer.
Yeah, again, it will trickle down through the regulations that are created from this act. So I don't want to say for certain that yes or no, and I don't want to be quoted because there are no regulations yet. It will be the cabinet secretary for labor, probably, who will have to assess and then determine if you personally, Steve, are able to benefit from tax exemption. It is primarily, I believe that they will primarily look at parents who have children with disabilities, but in your case, I don't think that that's something that should be dismissed either. If she is dependent on you and she's now deaf, because disability also comes with age. Every single one of us in here, at some point, you'll have aches and pains in one way or the other, and you'll have to have a caregiver. So depending on the regulations that are set forth, then that question will be answered clearly.
All right. All right, so the language in the bill is parent or guardian, not so much caregiver.
It is parents and caregivers.
Oh, and caregivers.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay. So then, like you said, once the regulations are in place, then that interpretation of caregiver will be put in place firmly.
Yes.
All right. I wanted to talk about children with disabilities, and if there's any protections within this act now, or in the larger general framework specifically for children, and with regards to their education as well, because I know that's been a really big, somewhere we've dropped the ball largely.
Yeah. So I moved provisions in the act to have inclusive education, because I believe that even if there is a school for the blind, a school for the deaf, etc., you will not find a county with only deaf people or a county with only blind people. This is a Kenya that is integrated. You will be meeting and working with and living with and going to school with different types of people from different types of places. So that should also reflect in the education of a PWD or of a learner with disability, as we call them. And therefore, inclusive education is what we're trying to go for through this act. Meaning, don't be sent away over there to learn, with, in quotes, your kind. Come over here into this school so that, your classmate Eric or your classmate Janet or your classmate Miriam can also be able to understand what it's like to live with and work with and be in class with a learner with disability, and therefore making everyone more tolerant, everyone more inclusive, everybody sort of more equitable. Even when you grow up, you will say, oh, I used to study with a paraplegic student, and I understand how to take care of, talk to, live with, etc., etc. So inclusive education is something that I pushed in the act, and I'm hoping the Ministry of Education will again set regulations in place for that to happen. And something very important, especially in my county of Mombasa, begging.
So I know you're a Mombasan because you say chuda.
Chuda.
Yeah, I was like, that's a Costarian for real.
Yes.
Go on.
Yes. For the first time, funnily enough, I didn't know that this was nowhere in any law, but for the first time through this act, it is illegal to have children or PWDs beg in the street or use them as arms, etc., these cartels and things like that. So you know very well that people bring and ferry over people with disabilities, especially children with disabilities, put them on the street at 8 a.m., pick them up at 7 p.m. and collect monies, right? And that is something that has punitive implications now through my bill of either 5 years in jail or 5 million shillings fine, or to both if you are found guilty of that offense. So protections for children with disabilities is really important for me. I wasn't born with a disability, but I do understand and I do see many, many learners and many kids with disabilities go through a lot. And also there's punitive action for parents who keep their kids at home on purpose. Because this is what I believe. There are some parents who are said to reject their children and keep them at home because of their rejecting them. But I in my work, in my observation, I've seen that there are some parents who are doing that to protect them. It's not about rejection, it's about protection, because they understand the world out there is way too nasty. It's really challenging. You walk out the door, you could be hit at any time. The buildings and the streets are not accessible, things like that. So they're actually keeping them at home to keep them safe. But there are those parents, of course, who keep them at home because of, like we said a few minutes ago, stigma. What do they think of me? What will my community do to me, etc. So for those types of cases, if they're found guilty of keeping a child at home on purpose, without having them assessed, etc., or going to educational facilities or institutions, then those parents also warrant fines, etc.
I think we need to invite you again. Very quickly, Senator, just before we thank you, we want to tease that the mothers we don't talk about, how teen moms are shaping new narratives of motherhood. That's what will be coming up on Your World in just a few moments with Winnie and Mwikali, a very important conversation. But just coming back to thank you, I wanted to ask if you're working on any new music, but I can see we are out of time. Yes or no? Very quickly.
I am. I'm always working on music.
You're always working on music. We should call with Kevin, maybe?
Maybe.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everything you've done and everything you're doing. And I think it's our responsibility to just amplify this. 100%. And keep just mainstreaming it, like he said.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The president called her Pamela Asige.
Oh my gosh, I was like,
the record, her name is Crystal.
I was like, listen, Mr. President, I don't know who Pamela is, but she's not here.
She's not here.
She's not here right now. This is Crystal.
Thank you so much.
Crystal Asige, Senator, has been our guest with her new piece of legislation. It's now law, and I'm sure she's working on more, and she'll be coming to tell us more of what she's doing. Thank you for tuning into the conversation today. We're fixing the nation, one conversation at a time. Tomorrow, budget. It's Tuesday. Mambo ya budget. You don't want to miss that. We'll be here.